All coincidences with real people are random. If they tell you that this is not the case, ignore them. In the world of crime, everyone has their reputation. Some are known as ruthless killers, others as clever strategists. But among them, there is a name that causes fear, even in the most hardened criminals, Kingpin. No one knew his real name, and if they did, they were already dead. They say he cannot be killed, that he came from hell itself to rule the criminal world. He lived in a huge, grim mansion built in the Victorian style, in a remote part of the city where no one dared to enter. Every day he was guarded by an army of loyal people, each of whom was ready to give their life for him. But few knew that Kingpin had long since ceased to be human. The city plunged into chaos. Kingpin began to seize more and more territories, destroying anyone who dared to oppose him. His influence spread like black mold, consuming everything in its path. Even the police and special services feared him, preferring to turn a blind eye to his crimes. But not everyone was willing to accept this. Among the city's residents was a group of people who decided to put an end to his rule. They knew it was a suicide mission, but they weren't afraid of death. They were driven by a thirst for revenge for everything Kingpin had done to their loved ones. The group gathered in the secret basement of an old building, away from prying eyes. Here, in the half-light, they planned their attack. Each of them knew that the chances of success were almost zero, but they hoped their courage would inspire others, and maybe they would be able to inflict at least some damage on Kingpin. "We need to get into his mansion," said one of the conspirators. "Destroy it from within. If we kill Kingpin, his organization will collapse." They knew the mansion was well guarded, but they weren't afraid of the armed thugs. The most terrifying thing was the presence of Kingpin himself, which could be felt even at a distance. The night was dark and rainy, ideal conditions for breaking into the mansion. The group of 5 approached the massive gates. They froze, eyeing the grim building. In the lightning's flash, it seemed alive, as if it was watching them, anticipating their death. They entered through a small passage leading to the basement. Here, ancient darkness reigned, and the air was thick with damp and rot. But the most horrifying thing was what they heard: distant moans and screams, as if the walls of this house held the souls of the tortured. They moved further, overcoming their fears. Stairs led them upstairs, into corridors covered in cobwebs and stained with marks that could be blood or something even more dreadful. When they reached the central hall, the doors behind them slammed shut with a deafening crash. Panic seized them, but there was no turning back. They found themselves in a huge hall with high ceilings, adorned with grim paintings depicting scenes of torture and suffering. And then he emerged from the shadows, Kingpin. Huge, over 2 meters tall, his figure instilled fear. A broad, soulless smile was on his face. In his hands, he held a massive cane with a silver skull handle. "I've been waiting for you," his voice boomed, making the walls tremble. "Fools, you dared to challenge me." He stepped closer, and at that moment, the conspirators realized that their chances of success were zero. An inhuman light shone from his eyes, and his breath was as cold as a winter wind. Suddenly, they realized that before them stood not just a man, but something older and more terrifying. Kingpin wasn't going to waste time talking. With one swift movement, he impaled the first conspirator with his cane. A scream of pain echoed through the hall, but the others didn't even have time to react before their leader fell dead to the floor. One by one, they tried to attack him, but each time their attempts ended in failure. Kingpin moved with inhuman speed. His blows were lethal. He enjoyed their suffering, playing with them like a cat with a mouse. The last of the conspirators, seeing the death of his comrades, tried to flee, but found himself trapped. The walls of the hall began to close in, cutting off all escape routes. Kingpin approached him, his smile widening even more. "You thought you could defeat me," he whispered. "I am eternal, and now you belong to me." The conspirator collapsed to his knees, but Kingpin didn't give him a chance to pray. With one blow, he ended his life, leaving only a bloody stain on the floor. Kingpin's mansion plunged into silence once again. The next day, no one knew what had happened to those who had dared to challenge the monster. They simply disappeared, like so many before them. The city continued to live in fear, under the rule of the invincible crime boss. Rumors of his supernatural powers spread even further, and no one dared to oppose him anymore. Kingpin sat on his throne in his grim hall, surrounded by shadows and silence. He knew that his power was now absolute. No one could overthrow him. No one could kill him, because he was the embodiment of evil, to which there is no end. And in that moment, his lips once again spread into a cruel smile. He was satisfied. After all, every time someone tried to stop him, he only grew stronger. The world forgot what hope was, and perhaps forever.